Okay, so just a couple of things just to give reference to in terms of how we generate an NMR spectrum. Obviously, the first one was the reference sample. As we drew on the previous clip, is a compound called tetramethylsilane, which as we drew on the previous slide. This is an organic molecule with a silicon in the center surrounded by 4 methyl groups. And as we said, this allows a small amount of sample to give rise to quite a decent sized peak. So within the actual sample, you don't need to add that much of it because obviously within each molecule there are 12 protons. Because of the symmetry of this molecule, all of those 12 protons are equivalent. So you only get one peak for TMS as a compound. So that doesn't complicate the sample by being too complicated just by the reference being in there. You just have a solitary peak at 0 ppm, which once you've referenced, everything else is then relative to that peak, and you can essentially then ignore it. Once you've done your sample, TMS is a relatively low boiling point, so you can take it away from your sample so you don't contaminate your sample should you need to have the sample used later. In generating the spectrum of your organic molecule, that organic molecule would have to be dissolved in a solvent. That solvent also mustn't contain any protons, because if you imagine an aqueous solution of water with your organic solvent, if you think about the concentration of water, you can work it out. It's about 55.5 molar of a concentration, so 55.5 moles per litre of water. So if you've got a, say, 0.1 molar solution of an organic solvent, of an organic compound, the amount of water compared to your actual sample you're trying to measure is huge. So the spectrum will be completely swamped by the presence of the hydrogens within the solvent itself, and actually the chances of you seeing your actual compound will be pretty minimal. So what we do is, instead of having a solvent with hydrogens in it, we swap that for an isotope of hydrogen deuterium. So you have D2O, a deuterated solvent, and deuterium is invisible to a proton NMR spectrum. Other solvents, if it doesn't happen to dissolve in water, you could use a chloroform, so CdCl3, again no protons, or take an analogous version of methane and not have any deuteriums in it either, and have something such as tetrachloromethane. Organic solvents or an aqueous solvent, but importantly, remove the hydrogens from the solvent so that they don't swamp your sample. Put a small amount of TMS in it, and then place it into your machine, and then you generate the spectrum.